Welcome to the Eventful Podcast, where real conversations meet big ideas.
This is where the real journey gets shared.
It's honest,
It's inspiring.
and it's always eventful. Today on the Eventful Podcast, we're joined by Jane Olson, founder of Illumini Body, and a former television executive who spent more than 2 decades leading creative and brand strategy for Bravo, Oxygen, and VH1. She now specializes in Pilates and rehabilitative movement, focusing on sustainable strength and whole person well-being. So, on today's episode of the Eventful Podcast, we are so excited to have Jane Olson as a guest. Jane has shaped some of television's biggest moments and most recognizable brands and built her own movement and wellness company as well. And Jane, we are so happy to have you here. If you want to just tell everybody a little bit about yourself and your
Yeah,
background and where you are now.
sure. So I spent like 20 plus years in media, very specifically TV. And as you said, I helped shape the brands of networks like Bravo, Oxygen, VH1, as both head of creative and advertising and head of marketing. So after about 20, 25 years in the business, sort of by accident, ended up becoming a Pilates teacher. My last job in television was sort of one job too far. And I left that job and knew in my heart that I did not want to do anything more in that industry, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do. And I had always, been interested in the body and how the body moves to feel good. Not necessarily working out, although obviously I did that too. I tried a lot of modalities, but Pilates sort of stuck with me. And it was the one that when I was having injury or anything like that, Pilates was the thing that helped me. And so what I really wanted to do, I had always been interested in understanding why that worked and how that worked. And I decided to study it. And from that studying, I became a teacher. And then here I am today, quite a few years later, doing a lot of things, teaching, training teachers, giving workshops, and in a completely different world than I was not that long ago. So,
And it's a very interesting evolution of your career and where you are now. We will obviously get into your wellness exploration and the Pilates theme of your life now. I have quite a few questions about where you sort of began your career and how you ended up in television. I mean, Bravo, obviously one of everyone's favorite networks. I know we have a big Bravo fan here with us today. But what some of your favorite shows are. Meredith will text me and be like, "Oh my God, did you see this?" And I'm like, I can't keep up. I can't keep up with you guys. I can't keep up with the reality shows. But Mer, you should tell her some of your favorite shows that you love.
I mean, I do love the Real Housewives franchise, but I think it's gone a little bit downhill. I used to love the old New York one. The new cast I don't like. However, I'm a
uh,
the Real Housewives of Salt Lake, so I will admit it.
all right. All right. They have a different twist for sure.
For sure.
I think every location has its own flavor, let's say.
Yeah.
I did used to watch Real Housewives of New York like way back in the day.
Yeah, that was a big departure from the OC ones. Yeah.
Television is not something that we have overlapped with very much, and would just love to hear how you got started and how you ended up in that world of the
Sure.
television networks.
So I went to school. My degree is in broadcast journalism. And at the time, it was really focused on news, which by the end of this happens to a lot of people, right? By the end of my 4 years in college, I was like, man, I don't really want to do news. That's not what I'm into. But I ended up getting a job. My first job in television was a temporary job in the promotions department. And I was filling in for somebody who had taken leave, and I didn't even know those jobs existed. And so it was doing all of the advertising, all the events, all the promotions for the station. And essentially I was mostly a copywriter, but also a department assistant and just sort of doing everything that needed to get done. It was a very small department, maybe like 6 or 7 people. And this was a local Fox affiliate in St. Louis. And about maybe a month into my time there, my boss got fired and they brought in somebody new. And that person loved me and which was great, and said, I'd like you to stay. And the other person coming back from leave, we're going to get them another job, but I want you to stay with me, help me, usher me into this new job of mine. So I stayed there for maybe 4 years and I became a producer of commercials. And so I saw that's what I want to do. And so I went and did it. That just sound like, and I went and did it. But that has been a theme from my whole career is that, oh, that thing exists. I like what that does. I'm going to try to do that. So during that time, there were a lot of changes. That second boss I had also left because there was ownership change in the company. And this is the first time I actually saw a company go from we're fine and you can kind of do whatever you want to like, no, we mean business. And so the new owners, this was the first station they owned, and they went on to build a station group of like, I don't know, 7 or 8 local stations and then sold it. After I left, they sold it for like $1 bajillion. And the 2 guys are now like private equity people. But they were quite young at the time. They were under 40 when they bought their first station and built this group, this station group. So that was my first, I mean, I was maybe 23 to 24 when that happened. And that was my first exposure to like, no, this is a business and it's underperforming and we can make some small changes and make a huge difference in the bottom line. So that was my first exposure to like, this is a real business. You have to take it seriously. And it was kind of thrilling. Actually, there were real metrics. We wanted to get ratings, we wanted to get more advertising. So, it sounds silly, but I was like, wow, okay, we're moving up and we're making this station. It doubled its revenue at some point while I was there in a very short time. Then, so I knew at that point that if I wanted to stay in television, I had to move. I couldn't stay in St. Louis. I had to move to either LA or New York. And New York was the first job that came up. And so I moved to New York. And I was quite nervous about moving to New York because I thought this is a national cable network. I worked for AMC at the time. And it's going to be really challenging and competitive. And it wasn't. It was more of like not that serious. I mean, it was serious. Obviously, they were in business, but it was just kind of like, yeah, that's great. You have your deadlines, you have your stuff. And the one thing that company had was that it was starting business after business after business after business after business. And so they were just launching cable networks with just ideas and some content. And so I got to work on the launch of a lot of different networks. And that taught me a lot about branding, a lot about positioning, a lot about the different marketplaces that you need to position it to, whether you're trying to get on a cable distribution system or whether you're trying to appeal to consumers, what's going to bring in the money, what's more important. So I spent quite a bit of time there because I had many different jobs. And then I decided to leave there when I saw a very small cable network that was being run by a woman I had worked for a very small period of time, like maybe 2 months at AMC. She had come in as a temporary person who was head of programming, and she was the most serious, whip smart. And then when I say serious, I mean just like, this is going to work. This isn't going to work. Why are you doing that? Why are you not doing that? Just like business decision after business decision, super strategic. And she went to run this small cable network and I wanted to work with her. And I contacted her and she said, well, by the way, we're looking for a creative director for this network. Are you interested? And I said, yes, I am. And I went to work with her and she ended up, that network was called Trio. That was a long time ago. And she ended up, when NBC bought that network, they put her in charge of Bravo. And she took me over to Bravo along with some other of her staff. That was a big inflection point for Bravo. We launched Project Runway. We launched Top Chef. We launched the Real Housewives. A lot of their signature franchises happened when I was their creative director. So that was very fast paced, high level of pressure, but also it was one of the first times that I had ever had a team of my peers all pointed in the same direction and working toward the same thing. And that was also very exciting and kind of a new thing to the degree that it happened. So I spent a number of years there as their creative director. And then we were owned by NBCU, and then they bought Oxygen. And that same person, that same woman, was over Oxygen as well. And she put my current boss in place to run the network. And he asked me to come over as the head of marketing and creative. So I did that. And then that went through a bunch of changes. And after maybe like 6 years, I left there. And I was sort of like, I don't know what I want to do. And then they recruited me from VH1. And I was kind of like, yeah, I've done that job. I could do that. to be head of brand strategy and creative. And I should have sort of listened to my past gut and experience in terms of what excited me about taking my next job and having a focus on what I wanted to do next, because that job was not that interesting. It was challenging in a number of ways, as most, high up jobs were and are, but it didn't have a thing that I wanted to get from that job that I had identified in all of my previous jobs. So I left after not that long and knew that that was sort of I don't want to be in television anymore.
Mhm.
And I spent a long time trying to figure out what I did want to do. And none of it was Pilates. And so while I was figuring out, let me network with a ton of people, let me look at nonprofits, let me look at this thing, let me look at that thing, I was doing some consulting work for people who had called me, which was interesting. So basically, as I was going through this Pilates, because I had the time and money to do it, I was like, oh, well, this is fascinating and I'll start teaching. And so I did. But even when I started teaching, it was sort of because I was going through a teaching program, not because it was like, I want to be a Pilates teacher. So that's the sort of accidental way that I came to be this. And that's the long version of my career, how I came here.
I mean, it's fascinating. When I think about that era of Bravo, I was kind of in college and it was all very new,
Yeah.
those reality shows, and I'm even just thinking of the Real Housewives, and there were probably so many more that I watched back then. And so it sounds like you were really at the helm of and in the mix when all of those were launched and started, which to me, I think paved the way for obviously what television, all those sort of the ancillary shows that have extrapolated from that original era and those original casts to now, but also what we see on social media, right? Because I feel like
Yeah.
to me, reality television was the precursor of social media and TikTok. And, everybody loves to see real life and real people and real drama, whether the drama's real or not, I think is a
Yeah.
different conversation. I do have to mention too that Meredith and I have been approached a couple of times about having a reality show over the past six years that we've had our business, but that's a different conversation. Things happen on a daily, weekly basis where we look at each other and we say, that would be a great episode for our reality show. What's happening?
Yeah.
We can think about a couple of things today that have just been because our lives have gotten so crazy. It's just been so much
It's
drama.
its own job. That's for
It is.
sure.
Over the years, we've planned more than 1,000 events around the world, which means we've spent a lot of time inside incredible hotel properties. From remote ranches to historic estates to urban icons, we've seen firsthand what makes a venue truly work for groups. In each episode of this season, we're highlighting one property that we love or that has seriously impressed us. Our property spotlight today is Commodore Perry in Austin, Texas. With historic architecture, intimate scale, and beautifully layered design, it feels more like a private estate than a hotel. Perfect for executive offsites and creative gatherings where the setting of an event really matters. We recently held a customer advisory board event here for a client, and we were blown away with the service and attention to detail.
I mean, I had a really great time when I was working in television. I mean, it was exciting. And many, many people, lots of millions of people love TV as evidenced by the ratings. And to be able to craft the messaging and the brand for networks that really, people love and feel an emotional connection to is a privilege, And like I said, it speaks to the team that was there, and the vision of Lauren Zelaznik, who was the head of the network when I worked there. She was the woman I went to work for when I left AMC and went to work for Trio. So that was really exciting. And I will say, also learned a lot about being on a team. I learned a lot about having a strategic business and what that takes and how much of that now has become really, really data driven versus a mix. And obviously data is helpful and something that is necessary, but the balance between good instinct and data, I think is a hard one to mix, especially when you come to a place where you have so much data. Especially when you talk about streaming services and, you can see what people do minute by minute. And making decisions in that, I think, is a challenge because you don't allow in other ideas. So, and I think that's ultimately going to be the push and pull, or already is the push and pull with AI in the creative industry.
Mm.
Is it's only working with the information it has, not new ideas and new information. So
Oh,
how to
man.
balance this
We
challenging.
could talk about that for a
It's a
long
whole other topic.
the entire episode. And I think we see that in what we do as well, where we are creatives and we love to bring new things to the table for our clients and for each project that we're working on. But we also know what works and we know what people like
Yeah,
and we know what creates how we measure success. And it's always a balance of trying to go with your gut and your human expertise, and then also relying on what has worked last time or maybe what worked for a client on previous events. Or so that's always a balance. I think just in life, really, not even
yeah.
corporate.
But yeah, you don't, people are obviously, most companies are risk averse because
Mhm,
they have a bottom line that they have to protect. And I'm sure even on an event by event basis,
mhm.
nobody wants their thing to be the experiment.
Correct.
So, you know, even though they all
Absolutely.
want something new.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
yeah.
Exactly. We see it all the time.
So I know you touched upon it, Jane, when you were just going through your career, but I'd love to discuss more about going with your gut instinct when you said that your last job in TV, I believe, was the one at VH1, and why you felt like you had already kind of gone past that point of wanting to do that, but you hadn't necessarily listened to your gut in that. So maybe we can just go a little bit deeper into that. That will go into where you are now with a totally different career path.
Yeah, sure. So just one small story that will tie in, I promise. When I got that first job in St. Louis, I'd been out of college and I just like sent resumes everywhere, even places that I really had no desire to work. And I had been at that job maybe 2 months and I was making, I don't know, it wasn't minimum wage, but it was not that far away from minimum wage. It was pretty low. But I was working at TV and that was great. And I was having a great time. So I got a call from the post office. So I had sent my resume into like the federal government employment agency. And they just, at the time, I guess, they would just take the resume and kind of have it in a database. And any federal agency that was looking for a job could could access this. So the post office called me and they said, "We got your resume and we want to bring you in for an interview." And I said, "Sure." So I went, and this was a temporary job that I had in TV. So I'm like, "Sure, I'll go in for an interview." I went in for the interview and the job was in HR, and it was telling people who applied for jobs at the post office that they didn't get the job. I was like,
That's such a
that sounds like an
niche
awful
job.
job. Yeah, it is a niche job. And all I could think about was I'm the person who's going to tell people that they didn't get a job at the post office. And that just sounded like a day of bad vibes day after day. But the pay for that job was double what my pay was at the TV station. And so we went through the whole hiring process and they offered me the job. And I went to my boss and I said, "Look, I'm not asking you to match this, but I would like a little bit more." And so he went to the head of the station at the time, who was a notorious penny pincher, and he got me, I don't know, like another dollar an hour, some like not very significant amount of money. And it certainly wasn't double. But I said to myself, like, I know that if I have to do that job at the post office, I'm just going to be miserable. So I said, okay, I'm taking this low amount of money and I'm going to commit myself to and be okay with it. And that very first decision in my career that I had to make based on not making money is the thing that I can string together through all of these jobs. Mainly, they didn't pay more, but there was something that I really wanted to do, and money was not the driving factor. And
Mm,
when I went to work at VH1, it was all about money.
mhm,
And I got there and it was like a month and I'm like, that was a bad decision. And I knew in my head that that had been the thing that made me happy was not money.
mhm,
And so I deliberately ignored that and said, "I've done this job for years and years. I can do it again." And I wasn't happy doing it. And
mm,
so I knew that pretty early on in that job. After about 3 or 4 months, I sort of made a decision to try to um, get myself out of that job, which worked, which is they have a great HR department. They're like, if you're not happy, if you like another job, I'm like, I don't really want another job now. And so I was able to, with the help of a friend of mine, sort of manage an exit plan that was really, really good for me. Then I said, well, what do I want to do? And I tried really hard to figure that out instead of sort of helping myself drift toward the thing that I was really interested in. Now, I don't say that that was a waste of time to try to figure it out. I mean, like I said, I consulted with people, and that taught me a lot about what I didn't want to do for a longer term time. But I think that trying so hard to figure it out negated a lot of the things that I already knew about myself. There's no path when you decide to do that. You're like, I'm going to change, but I don't really know what I want to change. I just know I don't want to do this thing. And so, without having a roadmap, you try really hard to develop that roadmap. And because all that stuff needs to be really tangible, I tended to ignore the stuff that wasn't tangible, which was my gut. So, gut and past experience, which is a little bit more tangible. And sometimes it's hard to know those things about yourself. You can see patterns, but to actually know it in your heart and in your
Mhm,
psyche is a more challenging thing. So, like I said, I knew it. And at that point in my life, I'm sort of like, I know that this isn't right. And I'm not going to spend any more time trying
mhm,
to make it right.
Yeah.
So,
mhm. And how many years ago was that? How long have you been in this new phase?
that was probably 2016, I think.
Okay.
2016, 2017, something like that. And then I just, like I said, I spent a lot of time networking with people trying to figure out what I wanted to do. Like, what do you do? What's your business? So, like
Mhm,
all over, all different kinds of industries. And I had did consulting for different industries too, which was also interesting because I thought, oh, I'll transfer all these skills I have to a different industry. And I just didn't want to,
mhm,
like I enjoyed it and I was like, "Oh, I can do that," but it wasn't something that I felt energized by.
mhm,
So then I decided, well, I have this time and I'm going to do this thing that I've been interested in
mhm,
since I am also looking for my long-term plan. And
mhm.
that kind of became my long-term plan.
I I think the word
Maybe I'll do the thing I'm interested in. How about that?
I know. What are you energized by and what are you not energized by? I mean, in talking about gut instinct and following your gut versus following the rational logic of, can I keep a steady income? Or
Yeah.
why would I do something new? I think thinking about what energizes you or the contrary to that with jobs, people, locations, and where you want to move, where you want to live,
Yeah.
relationships, all kinds of stuff. It's so important to, I think, use that as a guide. And I think even when we were starting our company, it's very scary to do something new and to not know where that path leads, but to feel the pull in a certain direction and to have the courage to follow that pull and just take it step by step and see where you end up, just knowing you're being guided by divinely, your gut, whatever you think or feel or believe you're being guided by, it is something. And so I want to look into what it was like to make that leap, to make that step into a totally new territory, known world of wellness and how you created what you're doing now and sort of, I guess, how you figured out in the over the past 10 years your path of what led from there to here. And if you could just highlight a bit of that for
Sure.
everyone.
So, one of the things that I most enjoyed when I started studying Pilates and the program that I chose to get certified was a program that my longtime Pilates teachers had gone through and that she recommended for me. And it's a program that is kind of clinical in its approach to
Mhm,
Pilates and very much rooted in anatomy and kinematics of movement. So it's a little drier than a lot of Pilates programs. I had never been a science person in high school and college. Like I got the minimum out of the way and went into a creative field. And this again, once I sort of was able to absorb it and apply it to movement, it became a thing that opened a door for me in terms of the way I think about my own movement and working with the clients that I was getting. And the second part of that is this program also focuses a lot on people with chronic conditions, injuries, things that you might go to PT for and then step down into Pilates. So there's a lot of learning on that front, but I had not ever really been exposed to either. And so the connection between this movement can help this thing be better was a bit of a bigger revelation than what I had even experienced in my own body. And so as I began to study that more and more and more, it became even more and more fascinating and apparent how not locked down that space is, meaning that's like a very lot of different words that don't say much. But what I mean is you think of science and things like anatomy and biology and kinematics as being like very studied and very specific. Like you do this thing, we know that that's going to happen. It's been researched, it's been proven. And it is just not like that. Everybody's body is different. It reacts to movement different. It reacts to stimulus different. And so you can look for a definitive way to do a thing, and it's going to be different for everybody. And that I think was part of the both the frustration and of thrill. Like if I can get my knowledge deeper and deeper and deeper into this area and know more and more about it, I can feel more comfortable in those very large gray areas with people. And so that actually was part of what energized me there. The second part was the part that I loved about my own experience with this, which was as a doer of Pilates, learning more about my body. And so
Mhm.
one of the things that I kind of subconsciously started to do is educate my clients on their body and why the things we were doing were working for them. When you start to do those things, and that's again what you were drawn to, the clients that you work with are kind of self selected. They self select out, they self select in, right? So I ended up with a lot of people with chronic injuries, recent injuries, chronic situations, or just people who were aging, were athletes who were aging and wanted to keep doing the things that they were doing with a changing body. And so that has kind of, again, kind of de facto become my practice is making sure that the people that I work with understand why that we're doing what we're doing and understand why it's working in their body and me helping them get the parts of the body that's out of my scope to also be healthy. And I feel like that is not a very, I mean, I know a lot of Pilates teachers who do that, but it's not the norm.
Mhm.
And I know those teachers because we've become friends and colleagues. So I would say it's mostly helping people know what works in their own body and
Mhm.
understand their own body better so they can feel better.
Thank you so much for sharing more on that. I'm interested to know when you mentioned your practice. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I know you're based in New York, correct?
Mhm. Yeah.
And do you do home visits or do people come somewhere and meet with you? How do you sort of run that day to day?
So I believe you guys have taken Pilates, if I'm not
We have,
mistaken.
yeah.
So you know that the full expression of Pilates involves equipment, right?
Uh-huh.
So I do work out of two studios. So one of the studios is in my neighborhood. And so
Uh-huh.
it feels good to be part of my neighborhood community and know
Mhm.
people in my neighborhood and help people in my neighborhood. And so I work out of there. And then I have another studio, which is the studio where I went through Pilates certification. And I am a senior instructor there, but I also train Pilates teachers there.
Mhm.
So I train people who are going through their certification. And then I also do virtual sessions
Okay.
with a lot of people. And that was not something that I expected to do.
Mhm.
But I started teaching maybe a year before the pandemic hit, maybe a year and a half,
Mhm.
and nobody's coming in. And so I sort of had to really fall in love with not using equipment.
Mhm.
And there were quite a few people who, even when all the restrictions lifted, just didn't want to come back into the studio. And so I do quite a few there. And then I have some international clients that I work with virtually as well.
That's
Mhm.
very cool.
So it runs the gamut.
Yeah, that's interesting too, Jane, because we pivoted that the business that you're in now is it typically an in-person business, right? Events are
Yeah.
obviously a in-person business.
Yeah.
We started right before the pandemic as well, so I see that similarity. And we had to pivot to doing virtual events. Jess and I did it for about 2 years, so we know what it's like to kind of have to shift and shape based on what's going on.
Which is amazing that you had enough. I mean, again, talk about like having no roadmap, the fact that you guys had enough, that business energizes you enough and you were committed enough to starting it and continuing it to go through those hoops. That's amazing because that had to be more challenging than I can imagine.
Yes,
Thank
it
you.
was. A whole episode about that.
Yeah, I mean, it was a very interesting time, and the similarities between your journey and our journey is just, in 2019, areas and industries where people thought there was absolutely no way that they could not go to a certain location or have human interaction
Yeah.
or potentially do something virtually. Everybody had to get really creative. We all did, including you. And it's really shaped the world in so many ways and our
Yeah.
business in so many ways after the fact.
Yeah.
Mare, I know you have taken sort of a foray into your wellness journey over the past year. And I know that I need to work on that. I used to be a little more into wellness. Now I'm just, I don't know if I don't have time because Meredith sure has time. So she fits it in. I should probably be better about it.
I've always kind of been into health and wellness in my mindset, but I didn't do much about it. Um, I really got into, and I know that's a broad term, and now especially with social media, everyone is a manifestation coach. Like I feel like there's a lot,
Yeah.
and I say that lightly because I actually know very reputable, wonderful people that have helped me a lot. I think a lot of people, influencers, they just say there's something, but they're not actually trained in it. So I want to be clear on that. We have a business. It's very all encompassing. I love my business. It's been extremely profound and I adore it. I think where I've struggled with is balance, right? And I think a lot of people struggle with that, whether you have your own business or you're working somewhere. We talk a lot about it in other podcasts about burnout. And I've also gone through some grief journeys in the last 6 years between losing loved ones that have made me really have a mindset shift. So I think for me, my wellness journey has gone from in a couple of ways, right? And I do love Pilates actually, Jane. So that's something that I've kind of discovered. I'm not crazy consistent with it. I'd like to be more consistent with it, but
I'm either.
I've done a lot of coaching and there's simple things that I do every day. I've split my time between New York and California. I'm in California right now. Obviously, it's more conducive to this weather wise in the winter, but I have to walk at least 10,000 steps a day. It's something that I'm a little crazy about. I have a dog. So there's little things that I implement into my life that I've learned that bring me joy, right? And it helps me be better at my business too, because if I'm joyful in other areas, I can be a better business owner. I'm not saying that I don't get stressed. You should have seen me yesterday. But I think that I've really discovered how it's important to try to implement different things. And it doesn't need to be something massive. The way that I am, I used to be the kind of person, it's an all or nothing. And I've learned as I've gotten older, I don't know if it's with age or just experience, it doesn't always have to be all or nothing. We can do little things that add up. And so, like that, the walking thing is a huge part of my life. Anyone that knows me knows I walk like a crazy person, but 10,000 steps isn't even that much. I sometimes am over 20,000 on a normal day, but I just have to carve out time to do those things because it helps me feel grounded and balanced. And I've done a lot of self work with different manifestation coaches as well as different actual just coaching with people. So that's my wellness journey. I've also done retreats. Something that I want to just knows about is maybe we do it together for a prospect, but I would love to open up a wellness, like a retreat center
Oh,
somewhere.
that's fantastic. That's such a great segue from,
Mhm.
Yeah, and
yeah.
just implementing the skills that I know from being an events person, how can that be carried over in other ways? And there's so many ways that we can do that.
Yeah.
We spend a lot of time on this show talking about what actually makes events work, how strategy, leadership, and momentum come together in real life. That's exactly why we built Prospect 365, our partnership model for teams producing multiple events each year who want a strategic partner, not just a vendor. We stay close to your events calendar and your marketing goals, giving you consistent expertise, predictable support, and a team that truly feels like an extension of yours. If that sounds like the kind of support that your team has been looking for, you can learn more at prospectevents.com/prospect365.
You're absolutely right. I think that what stops a lot of people from practices that are beneficial and joyful is the overwhelming sense of starting. Like, I have to walk 10,000 steps. Well, like, how about you just walk down the block and then walk back? I mean, if you can't get in the 10,000, just do something that makes you feel better. And I think that that sense of like, I have to do this all or nothing is unfortunate because then you don't do it and then you have nothing.
Mhm,
And then all you have is stress. When
mhm.
I was working at Bravo, things had really started to take it off. So it was probably like the second or third year that I was there. And I remember every single person in the marketing department had some kind of stress related issue.
Yeah.
Somebody had shingles, somebody had a gastrointestinal issue, somebody's back went out. Like they all had it at the same time. That's bad. That's
Yeah.
not, I mean, everybody was working really hard, but that's bad. That was also sort of a warning of just like being on the lookout for that. And I think being able to, again, talk about listening to your gut, like really saying, need to do something else for myself. And that's a very important step to take. I applaud you for doing that.
My sister always says, because she's actually a coach more in the career side. What's her quote, Jess?
What got you maybe what got you here isn't gonna get you there.
Yeah, maybe what
Yeah.
got you there. Because I used to work, 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 whether I was in house or, and then I was so burnt out and so stressed and not the person I know I can be, not the best version of myself, that it's not working. So I
Mhm,
can keep
Yeah.
continuing that journey, but it's clearly not working. And I've
mhm,
crashed and
Yeah.
burned many times before.
mhm.
Yeah.
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 And when I started studying Pilates, like taking it to learn it, to teach it, I was still like not a very, what I would call woo woo person. I was very, like, what's the science behind that? And what's this? And I think immersing myself in this world that is quote unquote scientific, but also very gray, really opened me up to a lot of different things that I might have given an eye roll to earlier, like Reiki or manifestation, all of those things, whatever works for you and your body and your mind works. And so now I'm just like, what is it? Let me try it. That's great. Sound baths. Those are
I love
fantastic.
yeah.
Yeah. you
Also a
know?
balance. I mean, and we all there's a balance between, corporate and also the woo-woo world, and I think Meredith and I both sort of strike that balance. We have both at our event last week. It was in California. That it makes sense for what I'm about to say, but we did have aura readings and chakra balancing,
Yeah.
which was really fun. People loved it.
I mean, everybody's curious,
My aura was very stressed and my chakras weren't moving, if that tells you anything. So maybe she's like, "Why is
You
your
might have
aura
2
so
new
red?"
clients because
So I'm going to take us into our next question. We ask every guest on the podcast about their eventful moments. Everybody has an eventful moment or several, whether it's a career moment, life moments. We'd love to hear just a pivotal point from your career or personal journey that shifted your perspective and set this new chapter for you in motion.
One of the things that I had a lot of was a big challenge for me was the shift in my self identity of who I am
Hmm.
as somebody who worked in television for a long time and then somebody who doesn't work in television. Now, I knew I didn't want to go back into that industry, but it had been such not just a part of who I am as a person, but a part of who I was to other people. Meaning, you go to your family reunion and people are like, oh, you work at TV. I've got a great idea for a show. And you're like, okay, whatever. But there's something inherently interesting that people are interested in and can latch onto. And even if I was an accountant in TV, I think people would be like, oh, you work in TV. That had become a thing that I think meant more to my identity. I don't even want to say meant more to me, but was more a part of my identity than I realized. And so when I left that and was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, you would meet somebody and they say, what do you do? Now I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. So I would just say, oh, I work in TV or I worked in TV and I am still consulting. And letting go of that was very hard. And I was on a trip with a friend of mine who we had worked in TV together at my very first job. And I just started teaching Pilates, but I didn't really believe that that was going to be a thing I was going to do for a very long time. And we were on a trip and we met some people and they said, what do you do for a living? And I said, you know what? It's now or never. I teach Pilates.
Hmm.
The most hilarious thing happened, which was the guy goes, huh, okay. Like, I have no interest in talking to you. No value to me because I was like, okay. Like,
Everybody wants
okay.
to hear about Andy Cohen in the housewife.
Yeah, exactly. Where do you work? Oh, bravo. Did you meet Heidi Klum? Did you meet, like, okay,
Yeah.
great. So, and I think that had been the thing that I was fearing, that part of me was not, interesting or valuable or whatever. Actually, it was just hilarious.
Mhm.
And I sort of like, okay, well, that's done. And I'm now a Pilates teacher. Stepped over that line and that was it. But yeah, I will never forget. No going back from that. I love
Um,
it.
I think it's very interesting that you're a Pilates teacher. I'd love to talk offline about totally fantastic. Well, I think we are almost out of time. But thank you so much, Jane, for joining us. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. It was great talking with you guys. This was so fun.
So fun. I think our listeners are going to just pull a lot of wisdom and insight out of your message about being able to transition or make the leap into something completely new and different and learning about a different industry and really starting a new life from the corporate world of what they've done before. I think there's going to be a lot of value for people out of this. So I appreciate you sharing your story and joining us.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And I
Thank you.
look forward to seeing what your wellness retreats look like. That's so
Same.
exciting.
Well, maybe we'll be teaching at it. That would be ideal.
I would love that.
We'd want
I would
to
love
bring
it.
in people that we know. So that would be great to
Yeah,
have you there
I'm
when
there.
that's happening. We're going to manifest that this happens. So
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All
Thank
right.
you so much, Jane.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Eventful Podcast. If you loved this episode, follow us on Spotify or Apple Podcasts and catch us on Instagram at the handle @theeventfulpod. See you next week.